John, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, especially during a hectic time as of now, to get on the show with us. We're honored and humbled to have such a guy on with your level of experience. And I think, to start out, we mostly like to just get kind of your perspective and your insight on how you got into the commercial real estate development business. We've kind of given our listeners a little bit of background on you, but we'd like to obviously hear that from you on how you got into the business just to start out.
Thanks, Clayton. Yeah, first, to correct something you just said, as far as I can tell, my schedule is wide open for the rest of my life, or until the governor lets us go back to work.
Amen.
We basically have no appointments. I got into business in my late 20s. I was a real estate lawyer with a relatively fancy law firm in San Francisco. I kind of fell into being a lawyer for our developer clients, and I think I was making $15,000 a year, and I was pretty good at basic arithmetic. And so while I was sitting there doing the deals for my clients, I was on the side kind of adding up the money these guys were going to make, the developers. And then, so I'm in my mid-20s and they're 30. And I said, whoa, this guy's going to make $1 million on this deal, and I'm doing all the work. So I just pretty much decided, and it looked like a lot more fun to be on the business side than to be the lawyer filling in the blanks. So I kept hoping that some client of mine would recognize how brilliant I was and hire me, and take me in as a junior partner. But that just never happened. Maybe I wasn't as brilliant as I thought. But I ended up teaming up with an older client who was a pretty accomplished, older being 42, accomplished shopping center developer. And he was very good at laying out shopping centers, at putting in the parking the right way and the trash and everything else. But I had more experience than he did on the financing side of it. And so we started together in 1983, built a shopping center in Healdsburg, California, that we still own, a Safeway anchored center that worked out really well. And that's how I fell into retail. Absolutely fell into it. And right now, just to kind of zoom, if you'll pardon the pun, all the way to the present, our portfolio is supermarket based. Our portfolio, to the extent that we're in retail, it's almost all supermarket anchored. So while our small tenants they're shut down, so they're all suffering, our big tenants, our anchors, are doing great. The supermarkets are knocking the hide off the ball right now. So we don't have the problem that if you own a power center, and if you're anchored by soft or hard goods, you really have problems. Fortunately, we don't have that issue.
Yeah, it's a good spot to be in right now, and within my family's portfolio, same. We have grocers, and we're thankful to have them at this time in history. And I think it's interesting because, and we'll touch on this a little later as well, but it kind of all boils down to fundamentals of the real estate again. And certain categories are obviously needed and essential, and others aren't. And we're again kind of getting reminded of that at this point in time. So, but one thing I wanted to compliment you on is your book. I've read it a couple times now, and I love the humor in it, number one, and it's a fantastic book, but it focuses on the important aspect of it without getting too far down into the weeds of commercial real estate development.
Right.
And highly recommend it, and we'll put obviously the link to the book in the show notes. But my question to you is, what do you feel like is the main character trait that a developer really needs in order to be successful in commercial real estate development? Because it really is a tough field.
That's a great question. I think if you ask my wife, she would say persistence. Mm-hmm. You just got to, if you get your feelings hurt if you take no for an answer, the first 3 or 4 times you hear no, you're probably not meant to be a developer. There's a lot of skills that you need. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife. You need 5 or 6 basic skills, but in order to succeed, you just need to hang in there. Because, Clayton, I found that for the most part, the best you can hope to encounter as a developer is benign indifference. Like, okay, we don't really care if you succeed. But often it's open hostility, from neighbors if you're trying to get something rezoned, from cities if you're trying to do anything. And then meanwhile, there's lots of competition, and it's a tough business. So just hanging in there, I think.
And just persistence.
Yeah, so I'll go with persistence. Obviously, it takes brains. The other thing that it takes, it's a little bit hard to quantify, and you guys, you both know this. You probably know people who are way smarter than you are, who have tried to be in development and have failed. It's not just raw intelligence. I know guys that are, I can talk to them for 5 minutes and say, whoa, this guy is smart. But what you need to have the ability to do is analyze, parse risk to say, okay, a really smart guy, he'll look at a deal and he'll say, holy cow, there are these 50 risk items, right? And I'm overwhelmed by them. A natural developer will look through those 50 risks and say, 35 of them are bullshit. Because the lawyer, particularly when you're starting out, and if you have a really persnickety lawyer, the lawyer will say, oh my God, here are all the things that could go wrong. And this may be the wrong time to say this, but you say, no, I'm not really worried about World War III happening. I'll take that risk.
Yeah.
But a developer says, here are the 2 risks that I really need to focus on. I've got to get a lease signed before I close, or I've got to get this zoning done before I close. And then, so you analyze it, and you have to accept the risk. When I practiced law, there were a lot of lawyers, very smart guys, highly intellectual guys, who were able to say, here are the risks, John, but they couldn't take them themselves. It's like deer in the headlights. Holy cow, I'm going to risk $1 million on this. I can't do that. So you need to analyze the risk, understand it, and then be willing to take it. Because what I have found, guys, is that unless there's a real risk in the deal, it's very hard to make a real serious profit.
Well, and that I think that's an excellent point. And kind of to, coattail off of what you just said, one thing I really, really liked about your book is the fact that you said you should be able to analyze any deal off of a napkin. And I think that, that's what I enjoyed about your book. It's just the fundamentals of what you should be able to do when analyze a deal. There's all these different metrics that are out there. There's analysis paralysis. And like we've said in historical shows, there's so many smart, intelligent people that can talk themselves out of deals. And to be able to, underwrite a deal and make sure that it works on a surface level can save you an enormous amount of time and money. And the other point, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about that as well, and what exactly you would write on the back of a napkin for a lot of listeners out there that may be newer into the commercial development business. And then also the point that I really like that I kind of want you to explain, which you don't hear a lot about on a lot of books and a lot of podcasts that you listen to, is, the fact that you're going to lose money at some point in time in real estate. And again, I felt like that was just a real life point that you were making in your book. So I'd like to have you kind of speak about those 2 points if you can.
Okay, well, take them in order. Deals should be, it all comes down to kind of a yes, no, but you ought to be able to. So you 2 are going to pitch a deal to me, and you say, John, here's the deal. We're going to buy this apartment building for $2 million, and we're going to put $500,000 into it, and we're going to raise the rents as a result of upgrading these units by 20%. And at the end of the day, let's say it'll cap out at a 5, or 6 or whatever it is, and we can sell it for 3.5. You know, net there's a $750,000 profit. It's really, I like to deal. You know, my wife says I should be a sports announcer because I have this real flair for the obvious. You know, an announcer says that they're going to lose if they don't put some points on the board. And so I try, and she says I oversimplify everything. Everything's black or white. But that's a good way for an initial approach. So it's like, you know, talk about what's the elevator pitch. Mm-hmm. So if you two are going to pitch me a deal and it gets really, really complicated, I say, wait a second, that doesn't work. You know, it's how much are we going to put in? How much are we going to then invest to fix it up? Or if we're going to build, and then what's the return? I like to think in round numbers, you know, so I can almost do it in I don't even need a napkin usually. I'm pretty good with very simple arithmetic. Yeah. It's just, what are we going to invest? What's the return going to be? And what's it going to be worth at the end of the day? And if it doesn't pass that test, then it's not worth getting into all the gyrations. And you absolutely put your finger on it. When someone says, here's the deal, here's year one, and then here's how income is going to go up 3% a year on this Argus model, and expenses are going to stay flat for 10 years, and cap rates are going to be 4.5% in 10 years. You know, I just say, well, that's a load of crap. Trying to predict cap rates 10 years out or like trying to predict weather 10 years out. It's not possible. So it's, what's the deal on the day that we finish? You know, what's the income? How much we're going to spend? You know, that's the back of the napkin.
And are you looking at cash on cash for those, John? Is that kind of the metric? I mean, you're a buy and hold investor, right? So unless you're refinancing, it's kind of hard to calculate an IRR. So what are you guys looking at?
That's a whole nother. Yeah, I look at it cash on cash, a very simple approach. And then so we've done 80 plus projects over the last nearly 40 years, about 2 a year. We have about 30 in the portfolio. These, again, my penchant for round numbers. So we've sold essentially 2 out of 3. And why do we do that? Because we don't have outside capital partners. So in order to buy the next property, you know, we're going to sell this one. So we'll sell 2, take the money, trade into the next one, or actually pay up taxes and buy the next one. But you're right. We look at it free and clear. But then if I say, you know, I really like this asset, like we bought a shopping center, a Safeway anchored center in a town called Scotts Valley, just south of the Bay, a couple of years ago. I thought, wow, this is a great asset. I really like it. And so then round numbers, it was 15. I could finance it for about 70%. So we put 10 million in debt on it. I think their interest rate was give or take 5%. And because of some peculiarities with the deal, we got it at about an 8% return. So then you can say, whoa. And so the cash on cash was immediately much higher because of that. But still, I wanted to make sure that it worked on day one, just what was the free and clear return. And then you can juice it by, you know, putting on the financing. Make sense?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. So, and would you call yourself, which I'm pretty sure you are, a value add or opportunistic investor? I mean,
yes.
As opposed to looking for something more stabilized, you know, turnkey, all teed up, are you looking for more of a project when you guys are going into a deal?
You know, that's a great question. It gets complicated. So if we just have money sitting in the bank or in stock or something, then and if you call me and say, hey, John, here's a finished McDonald's or a finished office building that's 100% leased and it's a good deal, blah, blah. I say, no, thanks, we're not going to do that. We're looking for ground up or a complete remodel, something where we can do a serious value add. Mm-hmm. And I used to say, and of course, just for the record, for all your viewers, I'm wrong about half the time. So just keep this in mind. But I used to
disclaimer from an attorney.
Disclaimer, yeah. I used to say the only way to make money in real estate was to do a value add. That, you know, just buying something clever, it just didn't work. But that actually hasn't proved out for us. We have done, and I think I just wrote a piece about that in the Registry magazine, where I talked about the value adds, which were close to 80% versus the purchases. And where we would do a straight purchase of a finished project was on a trade. Because back to risk analysis, you sell a piece of property because you get a great price, you put it into a trade, you've got 45 days to identify and 180 to close. That is not enough time, in my view, to vet a development deal. And so if I really want to trade, then I'll buy a finished property if I can. And so we've bought a couple of office buildings in downtown Palo Alto, just lucky that we didn't do anything to it. We just bought it, and they're a few blocks away, and those have done extraordinarily well. So we've been lucky there. But with fresh capital, it's got to be a value add play. If you guys said, hey, here's a good deal, it's an Albertsons that's underpriced by 25 basis points, I'd say, no thanks, I'm not interested unless I'm in a trade.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Makes sense. What to kind of cap off kind of the high level stuff, what do you feel is the best way to avoid failure in commercial development?
Being careful with your debt levels.
Good answer.
And your earlier question was, which I'd like to point out, because I think everybody who's done more than a couple of deals in real estate has lost money. Yeah. Absolutely everybody. Now, there are a few who say they haven't, but let's face it, they're lying. It is just too hard. Just look what's happened to us.
Amen.
I mean, the largest black swan ever just fell on us. In 2008 and 2006, if you had bought a property in 2004, 5, or 6, even if you were Bill Gates' son or Albert Einstein, when the collapse happened in 2008, it didn't matter. Prices just dropped by 40%. If you financed it at 70, 75%, and this is getting to your next question, and somehow that loan was called, you lost.
Yeah.
So I think Buffett said it's almost impossible to lose money in real estate if you don't use leverage. So we figured this out. Actually, it's sitting on my desk. Our portfolio-wide leverage is like 21, 22%. We own a number of properties free and clear. So wow. That's the best way to protect yourself in a downturn. So can we pay the taxes if all of our tenants move out? Sure. So the best way to go broke is to have too much leverage. It's also, in a rising market, the best way to get rich.
Right, and you point that out in your book with a couple of examples too.
Yeah. It's the classic double-edged sword. And when you're starting out and you don't have any money, you need more leverage. But if you get good at it, back to the earlier question of selling off assets, if you can sell 2 out of 3 and use some of that cash just to pay down your debt on what you've got, one of the plays that we like to do is to buy a property with 2 or 3 parcels to it, and then almost immediately sell 1 or 2 and then end up with 1, but then just allocate the basis to that last one, so we have a very limited amount of equity required and a very small loan. That's a strong play if you can pull it off.
I'm just curious, John, is there a spread that you guys typically underwrite? What are you comfortable with from a risk standpoint on a ground up deal?
Yeah, the old school spread when I was a kid was 200 basis points. I don't think that's really changed. But what happens, we were in this roaring bull market since you guys were in high school. The spreads got tighter and tighter and tighter because of the competition. And so then guys are doing it for 100 basis points or even less than that. And that's when you get jammed. I think 200 is still a good number.
Okay.
And that's what we shoot for. But it depends. If it's a super high quality deal, like say, wow, I could put Walmart in there and you know that you could sell a Walmart market at, let's say, a 5, and you could get a 20-year lease out of them. You could tighten it up a little bit.
Yeah. I was just curious what your rule of thumb is on that. So
yeah, it's 200 basis points.
200 basis points. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, you know, you're obviously in the vast majority of your portfolio is retail. So we'd like to talk to you a little bit about your expertise in retail and just kind of get your perspective on a couple different things. Obviously, retail has evolved so much over the past couple years, and well, really over the past decade, but really has been impacted over the last couple of years. I would just like to kind of give you free rein. Where do you feel like the retail real estate industry is currently, and where do you see it going?
Well, currently it's in the tank.
Well, I mean, aside from COVID-19.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, somebody pointed out to me that we personally are in the necessity retail business. And I said, that has a nice ring to it. So I think if you're a traditional shopping center, if you're a supermarket, a drugstore, a bank, a nail salon, pizza parlor, I think those are all okay, you know, putting aside the COVID. I think the soft goods and hard goods guys have been severely impacted by the internet. The winners in those groups, and Walmart strikes me as one, and Amazon, and I've used this analogy before, so forgive me, but Amazon's going hell bent for leather to get bricks and mortar locations, right? I'm sure it still is. Building bricks and mortar bookstores, it's building brick and mortar markets. It announced that it wanted to open 3,000 physical markets. And Amazon went the other way, and it was just picking up one little e-tailer after another. They're going to be like the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads and meet in the middle. They're the two behemoths that each will be perfectly comfortable. And it's like a switch hitter in baseball, left-handed, right-handed, internet, bricks and mortar. If you can do that, you're going to succeed. But what that means is you don't need as big of a brick and mortar presence, right? So I like this black, it's the North Face t-shirt, right? So I walk into North Face and I say, yeah, I like this in black, XX. Guy says, here it is. We only had one. I said, well, I'd like 3 or 4 of these. I like them in the winter. And he says, great, you'll have them tomorrow. You know, so he says, sign it here so I get the store credit, but it comes from the warehouse. Mm-hmm. So when I was a kid, you know, let's say they have 300 shirts in my size. Now they've got 20, so that they need much less physical space. So the other thing facing us, our challenge in retail before the internet, was that we had way too many square feet of retail space in the country. I forget the number, but is it 25 square feet for every man, woman, and child? Something like that. It's something on the order of 10 times as much retail here as, say, in Western Europe. So you combine too much retail space with the shrinking need for retail space, and you know, we haven't really recovered from the downturn of 10 years ago. I think retail rents are probably off 25-30% from where they were. We're building a brand new ground-up Safeway project in a town called Hercules. It was under construction until the shutdown, but the rent on that Safeway is actually lower than a deal we did in 2004, so 16 years ago, and not inflation adjusted, just dollar for dollar lower. Why? Because there are fewer competitors out there. So retail will be tricky. One of the interesting things, I'm not sure of this, but I think what happens out of this COVID is that we're going to have a lot of restaurant casualties. Not so much in the neighborhood centers, the quick serve guys and the fast food guys, but the traditional restaurants. I think maybe not so much your generation, but mine. I think this whole COVID scare is going to be like what happened to my grandparents in the Great Depression. It's going to change people's habits. like my grandparents wouldn't spend a dime, right, because of having to go through that crisis. I think people are going to start going out and sitting down in restaurants less. When the governor gives the ollie oxen free, people are still going to be reluctant to go out. So I think we're going to see restaurants shrink. And meanwhile, the little restaurants that are making it, they're like the rats that are surviving when the dinosaurs are dying. They're doing takeout, and they're doing okay, and they're doing takeout in a few hundred feet. So suddenly you got all those restaurant spaces, which I think will shrink. Sorry, I wish I had better.
Fascinating. In that same conversation, do you think that the drive up, pick up, grocery trend is going to continue? I mean, it seems logical that would be one area. Any other trends that you see as far as just retail, behavioral, sociological patterns that are going to stick?
Yeah, again, great question. I think, here's a question for you guys. When do you think the handshake comes back?
Man, I've been doing the elbow. I even had one client
or the man hugs.
Yeah.
I think the man hugs could go away. I think, and I got to say, I think this is crazy. I thought the same day delivery thing was absolutely crazy. It was a need that we didn't really need, but I think we wildly accelerated. People, my wife, all of her friends, everybody I know, that they're getting everything delivered to them. So we're creating a whole planet worth of garbage, cardboard and whatnot, which I think is regrettable. But I think we've just basically put, like in Fast and Furious, when they hit the nitro switch, on the card, I think the home delivery thing, we hit the nitro switch on that. I don't think that's going back. That's going to be a lot more.
Well, I'm just curious, again, you have decades in the business developing retail real estate. John, what are you doing now, differently looking at future projects or current projects, given the, evolution in technology? And I guess so that's question number one. Question number two, do you view technology and clicks as more of a friend to retail or more of a enemy to retail from a high level perspective?
So back to my earlier point, I don't think e-commerce really works independently. Back to Amazon needing physical locations. I think the retailer of the future will have a presence in our shopping centers, but to the extent there are hard goods or soft goods, it'll be a smaller presence, but they need a presence. I don't think there's a single pure play e-commerce retailer or e-tailer that's making money. You guys know this already. 40% of all purchases are returned. That there's no way a traditional department store, the returns were less than half of 1%. The e-commerce guys, they're trying, and then the other thing, which was absolutely counterintuitive to me, I found out that it's become really expensive to advertise on the internet. Thank you, Google. I think the e-commerce guys are finding out that it's cheaper to have a store, let's say in Union Square in San Francisco or on Madison in New York. It's cheaper to have a physical store where you have a lot of passers-by acting, where the store acts as part of your marketing. People seeing the brand there, than it is to buy an ad that gets you toward the top on the internet. So the internet doesn't kill retail; it shrinks it. It makes it, more vibrant, I hope. It doesn't affect, pizza. It doesn't affect nails. It doesn't affect personal services. And groceries, not that much. I think there's still the vast majority of people are going to want to pick their own tomatoes rather than have some minimum wage guy from Instacart pick them for them. But, that's a trend.
So Your project specifically, then, are you just mainly still focused on grocer? I mean, again, aside from everything that's going on, just because that's a necessity-based retailer, is there certain categories that you are bullish on right now within retail, and what categories, as well from a professional standpoint, are you concerned about that you would tell other folks in the business that, hey, I mean, if you guys have this within your tenant mix, you might want to reconsider?
Well, you don't need me to answer that. You can just look at the cap rates that are assigned to various product types. The power centers, the big box guys, the cap rates before all this, were 300 basis points higher than the supermarket centers. We've never done those. Again, we have a couple of junior major sort of soft goods users in our centers, but I think, I would advise anybody from staying away from malls and power centers or any hard or soft goods anchored centers.
What do you think happens with malls?
It depends. If they're in a strong location on the coast or in a strong neighborhood, then what's happening here in California for the best of them is that they're being retooled. So you take the old Safeway anchored center, you tear the whole thing down, you go up 6 stories. Merlone Geyer did a great job of this on San Antonio Road in Mountain View. So you build lots of residential on top of the center, and you densify, which is what we need to do anyway, to accommodate all the housing needs we have. Mm-hmm. So the best ones get retooled as mixed use, residential office, and the sad ones, I don't know what you do. I think you have to bulldoze them, because they're worth less than the raw land across the street, because there's no demo cost on the land across the street. But that stuff's not coming back, and I think the virus. Sorry Sears, sorry Kmart, sorry a bunch of guys. The virus just might finally knock all these guys off forever. That they've been Walking Dead for years.
Yeah.
So. My advice: don't go buy a Kmart unless you know how you're going to retool it.
Is there any categories out there specifically that are of interest to you that may be growing and thriving that you would advocate people look at?
Yeah, we still like supermarkets. Like I said, I'm building one right now. I just today, by coincidence, put some dirt in escrow for a 20,000 foot market. But I've got the tenant already pretty much primed for the deal. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, I've spent my whole career working with supermarkets, and I'm still very bullish on them. It's something I understand.
Would you say that you guys are in acquisition mode, John? Or still looking at development opportunities? And if so, are you going to stay in your same geographic area, or are there other markets that you're considering?
I like to joke that a deal basically has to hit me on the nose with a 2x4. I'm not actively looking, but if a good, we're still end up buying a couple deals a year. I've got some junior partners, guys your age that show me stuff. We bought a little center in Lake Oswego, Oregon last fall, a Trader Joe's center, a very strong center, which is way, you've read the book. So I said I don't go 2 hours beyond where I sit, but for that one, it was a finished center that we were going to rework, re-tenant, and I decided, sure, I'd do it. So I'm always looking, and I'll, just like you two, I'm sure I get 100 deals a day that zip by my screen. I don't look at any of those. Yeah. Somebody has to call me that I know and trust and say, hey, John, what do you think of this? And maybe out of 20 of those, I'll say, wow, the napkin works on this one. Let's get. Or sometimes they're so good, you kind of scratch your head and you say, wait a second, what's wrong?
Well, that doesn't happen very often, that's for sure.
It doesn't happen very often. But in your career, it might happen once or twice. Yeah. But so I'm always the best way to buy is when you don't have to. The best way to sell is when you don't have to, right? So,
Yeah, 100%.
You know, if you can get to a point where you don't need, a lot of guys need to buy because they need to generate fees, and so then they'll reach for it. Now, and of course, I was in that position when I was in my 20s and 30s, but if you're good at it and you're lucky, you get to a point where you can really be choosy, and that's where you want to end up.
What's been your most successful way of sourcing deals throughout the years, John?
Long-term relationships in the brokerage community. The thing I love about retail, it's the only, you know, of all of the real estate subsects, only retail has this long-term aspect to it. You know, if you're an industrial guy, you do one deal with so-and-so industrial company. If you're a multifamily guy, you've got 500 tenants you're never going to meet. Mm-hmm. And office, maybe there's a little bit of repeat business. The thing about retail, so I've been doing this for, say, 35 years at ICSC. Well, the same 400 clowns that I met 35 years ago are still in the business.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you treat them fairly and honestly, it pays off. And I love that about retail. And what I've noticed over the years, guys, is that the real estate reps for the various retailers, they'll jump around a lot, but they won't leave the geographic area. Mm-hmm. So that they may go from Starbucks to Leslie Pools to Safeway, but their real value to the retailer is their geographic knowledge. So that they don't tend to go from here to Chicago to Miami and back. And then ICSC is fun. I love it. It's like going to a high school reunion every year, you know, seeing everybody. And so the deals come in that way. I have done, you know, we don't like doing joint ventures, but we've done formal joint ventures and informal joint ventures, like this project that I just put in escrow. I knew that the supermarket wanted to be in this town. I said, hey, well, what do you think about this corner? I think I can get it. And they said, yeah, we like that corner. So I said, okay, great. I'll go tie it up. So
that's the way to do it, man.
It's the way to do it. But it takes a while. You know,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, it's not something you can do overnight, but so treating people right pays off in retail.
So stay persistent, treat people right.
Yeah.
Don't close without the lease in hand or at the rezoning completed. And it seems like you always carry a good sense of humor with you, so can't take it.
Yeah, well, you gotta laugh. Jesus, you gotta laugh. You know, just for reality. My life in the last 3 weeks, it's been like Fallujah, house-to-house warfare with all of these big credit tenants, national tenants that are publicly listed companies, or national tenants that are private but that are backed by gazillion-dollar private equity funds, and they're all saying, John, we can't pay the rent. And it's like, dude, you want me to give money to your multi-billion-dollar private equity fund? Just pay the rent. You know, it's not fun right now, but we'll get through it.
And that perfectly goes into what we wanted to talk about next, was obviously COVID-19. You know, kind of just to finish out the show here, but you know, it's something we're all obviously working through and struggling with right now. I mean, in your opinion, from an acquisition standpoint, and again, you know, we know you're not an economist or anything like that, but what do you feel like will come of this? I mean, do you see a pretty significant correction coming, and when do you kind of sense, based on your historical cycles, will there be a pricing adjustment? I mean, are you modifying your strategy and plan this year on the acquisition side of things based on COVID? I mean, kind of give us high level, you know, viewpoint on that.
Okay, so for that warning I gave you guys about being wrong half the time, okay, keep that in mind. I don't think this is a V recovery. I don't think.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was hoping for that. I think it's more of a check down, and then I don't know how many people we're going to end up with that are unemployed. 20 million. Now they'll gradually go back to work, but I think we're in for a real recession, and that could last several years. I could be totally wrong on that, but.
And what gives you that inclination? I'm just curious. What gives you that inclination that we're in it for 3 to 4 years?
Well, we've lost this whole quarter. It's, let's say March, April, May. You can't get that back. And it's going to, I just have this feeling, and you're right, I'm not an economist, but I think this is going to be, it won't just be startup. I think if all of the entertainment, the sports, the 100,000 foot or 100,000 person stadiums, I think there's going to be a reluctance. I don't think people, and the concerts, the dining, there's a whole lot of things that aren't, they're not going to immediately kick into gear. People aren't going to be immediately hired back, and this unemployment's going to linger for a while, I think. And I would be delighted to be wrong, as I so often am, and I just, again, I love my wife. She says, well, John, you ought to be a little bit more ashamed of the fact that you're wrong so often. But I say, oh, well, what the hell? What that does for us, we had 3 properties for sale because, I'm constantly trying to prune the portfolio, just sell the stuff that we don't really love and just kind of keep it moving and then have cash to buy. But basically, they're all still listed, but they're not going to sell. So that's what I just told our guys. In fact, one that we're going to sell, I said, screw it. You've got to pivot. You can't just bang your head against a wall. So I said, I love this asset anyway. We'll keep it. We'll just finance it long term. So just now we're deciding that was a sell, but now we're going to keep it long term. Actually, a couple of them that we'll do that with. And these are supermarkets that I like. More good advice: don't fall in love with real estate. There's got to be a country western song out there that's something to the effect of "Don't fall in love with nothing that can't fall in love with you." And that's good advice.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sell it when you can take a decent profit. We have historically, over the last 40 years, done better in down markets than up, because in up markets, we're saying, holy cow, I can't compete. I don't get that. And I'm competing with people who use other people's money. And we don't have outside partners. It's our money, my 2 partners and I. And so we end up sitting on our thumbs and looking pretty dumb in roaring markets. But then times like this, when capital gets a little bit tight and people get worried and then deals start to come out, I've noticed little bumps, for us. We'll, like a couple of years we might buy nothing, and then a couple of these down years we might buy 4 or 5 properties.
Right, sure.
And so I think we're in for a couple year correction, and I think we'll do fine by it. But again, those deals will have to bang me on the nose. But I'm sure they'll be out there.
And when do you anticipate seeing price reductions? Again, just shot from the hip.
Well, first I have to be proven right. If it is a V, if by July 1st everything is back to the way it was, then that won't happen. But if it lingers, maybe in the fall, if it's just kind of gradually dragging on, people, everybody's out there renegotiating rent right now. Somebody just sent me something that said some amazing percentage of residential renters aren't paying rent this month.
Really? Huh.
Yes, yeah, really. And I said, holy cow. There are people who truly can't pay rent, and there are people who are saying, what the hell, I might as well give it a shot. So there are going to be mom and pop investors who say, this isn't for me. I'm going to get out of this. not getting rent on this apartment building for the next 3 months isn't worth it. I'm going to sell, or this shopping center. I get calls from smaller shopping center developers, and they say, well, "Oh, what am I going to do?" Some of those will sell, and they'll be. I don't know if prices will be that much better, but the motivations will be a lot better. So,
Sure.
I'm just curious, what are you doing with your mom and pop tenants right now?
did you see that piece I wrote? That was in the Registry magazine.
It was very well received in the market. We posted it on our inner office workplace for everyone to read too across the country.
So just to repeat what we did, the world seemed to be collapsing the weekend of March 15th. We knew the governor was going to announce a shutdown on Monday. We knew our tenants were going to be utterly bereft. Like, holy cow, I'm shut down. What am I going to do? So we divided our tenants into three categories: pure mom and pops who were franchisees, like say Subway, and then credit tenants, everybody from say Starbucks to Safeway. And we decided we just forgave the rent outright on all the mom and pops for April. We told the franchisees, to the extent that you can get a break from your franchisor, we'll match it. And interesting on that, Subway stepped up big time. They were great to their franchisees. Round Table Pizza, which is a regional chain, I'm not sure you guys have it, but pretty big in California, they did. And then a number of franchisors wouldn't do a thing for their tenants, which is kind of sad. And so that worked out really well. Our little tenants, but my hope then, it seems like a year ago, but March 15th was that by May 1st, they'd all be open and they'd have a month of runway. And now I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. Actually, I had hoped they'd be open by April because it was a 3-week. I thought they'd be open like today, April 7th. But that's not happening. So we'll have to see what happens. And then I think what we'll do, the follow-on thing that we did, which isn't in the article, we did some research. We found what we thought was the best of the guides to how to apply for the federal money. Mm-hmm. And there was a really good one I think it was the Chamber of Commerce that was pretty simple, straightforward English. And so then we had our property managers at all our centers send that to each one of the tenants and say, you need to fill this out today. You need to go to your bank because there's money for you guys out there. And so we don't want you coming back to us for a rent break if you haven't applied for this. So our hope is that for May, they'll at least have applied. If we have to defer a little rent, we will, but that they'll pay it back, when they get the federal bailout funds.
Right.
Well, appreciate your guidance. We're coming up on 50 minutes here, so.
Okay. I'm warned. I don't have anything else to say.
Well, all kidding aside, we really do, and we wanted to do a show kind of that's a blend of your past and experience, but obviously get your insight on COVID and everything that's happening, because it's the elephant in the room right now. So, again, appreciate your time. Thanks for getting on the show with us. We'll put your contact information and the link to your book, along with some of the articles that we referenced in the show notes as well. And other than that, again, greatly appreciate your time. Thanks for doing it.
Clayton, Gannon, thanks, guys. Best wishes. Take care.
Yeah.
John, appreciate it.